Now it's time to hear from Saudi Sports Company and its plans for a new remote production facility. This is once again chaired by my colleague George. Over to you, George.
Hello. So the signing of Cristiano Ronaldo by Al Nassr was a real signal of intent by the Saudi Pro League. And with an influx of talent and growing interest from European broadcasters, the Saudi Sports Company is making significant investments into the coverage of the Saudi Pro League, including the build of a new remote production facility. So here to talk us through the aims of that project, the production plans, the technology choices and the progress so far, we have Peter van Dam. Peter is Chief Technology Officer at the Saudi Sports Company. And next to Peter is Ronald Meyvisch, who is a technology consultant working on the project. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Peter, to get us started, and for those that might not be familiar, can you give us an idea of what the Saudi Sports Company is and what it is that the organisation does in terms of coverage, production, distribution, and so on?
Good afternoon. Saudi Sports Company was founded about 2 years ago. And the main mandate, one of the main mandates was to bring up local sports in the picture and also bring the young people up to a point where they are encouraged to go and do sports. But we knew very well that only local sports would never get the exposure that we wanted. So we started looking at other points. We took the Saudi Football League, and from there we started to do a lot of IPs that made it interesting for us to, or for the viewer, to come and connect to us. We do this together with NBC, but is also a 100% Saudi company, and for the moment they do our distribution and play out on OTT also.
So there are some quite aggressive expansion plans. Can you give us a sense of what the Saudi Sports Company will become?
The journey started about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where we started to build a fiber network, 100 gig fiber network to reach stadium and other big sports venues. That is now expanding to also the entertainment venues in the kingdom. That was phase one of the vision of taking over the productions ourselves. Till today we are a company that has IPs and we have a partner that does our play out, but we want to become a full-fledged broadcaster. Main reason of this is, first of all, we do next season about 1,000 football games locally. Then we have our basketball, volleyball, handball, and then we have all the other sports that we are doing. And then we have the localizing of other international sports we are doing, like NFL, American basketball, cycling, European cycling, golf, whatever we take in, we localize it and personalize it into an Arabic form. So there was the point where we had to go and look at a new solution together with the fiber network we have already and what is ours to use for the next many years. We looked at another solution. Second reason is there that the local facilities we have today in Saudi Arabia are not up standard, what we need, what we want. For the local market, it could work, but even there, I believe we should not lower our standards. We should keep our standards. We worked long enough for it, so we should keep them. Having now, in phase one, Ronaldo coming in is a bigger international exposure, but we have it also in the Saudi sport, horse racing, where this exposure is massive. We have Dakar, we have Formula E. So there's so many other events that also are international exposure where the leadership said we need to have a standard and a very high standard that we can compete internationally. And there we went for an approach in remote production, especially for the tier one on an MPLS level for tier 2 and 3, it will be more on a cloud-based level. But tier 1 is a full-fledged remote production capacity, so where we would do all the games by the end of 2024 on a full remote basis.
So on the Saudi Pro League specifically, what does coverage look like at the moment? Because you mentioned the ambition to get to 1,000 games, for example. What does coverage look like now?
On a technical level?
Yeah, and in terms of your approach to production as well. So,
for the moment, it's very classic. It's an OB truck that goes. In some cases, a second OB is it's an Al-Nasser game. It's literally a main and a backup OB. In an Al-Nasser game, we have 3 SNGs standing there to have a backup of a backup of a backup. It's not our choice, but this is what the production company is doing. So it's a very classical approach where we don't see any progress coming. So the investments that need to be done before I hear is the new toys that make it and that gives the extra touch for the viewer at home. It stays behind, it lacks. So that's why we stepped in ourselves and said, okay, then we start doing it ourselves on a whole different base.
And so how would you summarize the reasons for that? Is that wanting greater control in order to lift the quality? Is that the best?
It's one of the visions. One of the visions of the Kingdom 2030 is becoming in anything and everything that we do up to an international standard. And this is in broadcast, but this is in everything that they want to achieve. So it's a vision that we try to follow, and I think we're gonna succeed. I'm sure we need to succeed. That's no choice.
The remote production center is at the heart of these plans. So can you just explain, and Ronald, maybe this is a question for you, because I know you've been working very closely on this project. What does remote mean in the context of what we've just been hearing about?
Well, remote means that actually on site we have cameras and commentators and maybe a small van to transport everything to the stadium. Now, it's not a small game, it's about 26 cameras, it's all UHD-HDR, which all needs to come to one central location where you can have up to 2-3 games simultaneously or one after the other. So that means you have to have a backbone where you have all the signals arriving from all the venues. And then you have, let's say, about 4 production galleries that alternate. And so the question we had there was, shall we go full IP there overall, or should we look at a more pragmatic approach? And the issue we have also here in Europe is finding competent staff. Because one of the things also in Saudi Arabia they want is not fly in people from Europe all the time to have the operations running. It means it's about training local staff. So we had to build a concept to do remote production where we can use as much local staff as we can. At the same time, have some specialists and then have the possibility to train people and actually make them ready to do the productions.
And when you talk about that staffing issue, that's across engineering, production, editorial roles, is it? And can you give us an idea of what that figure is at the moment and what you want that to become in the future?
So the figure today is that SSC is about 100 people, and by August it should be 700. I know. And this is a big part, is creative people. Cameramen, but also directors. We have international directors that come in, EVS operators, all kinds, and also production people that really can do storytelling and that know what is more needed than the 90 minutes. Because the 90 minutes is something, but it's everything around the 90 minutes that becomes much more important than only this 90 minutes of football. Don't get me wrong. But so the part of this is that a big part of our budget for the next 3 years is Saudiization, and it's a very important thing that we have is that we need to include the local people, and we need to train them, and we need to give them awareness, and we need to attract them, we need to make them eager and give them passion, and we have a young group of people. 37 years is the average age in Saudi Arabia, so we have very young people. But we have nothing that is related to broadcast. Everything that is now in Saudi Arabia working, and even in the Middle East, comes from outside, comes from Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, if it's Arabic speaking. But there's no real schooling, there's no real academy, and that's a part of our goal, is building up an academy and pulling people with us, young people, and getting them excited about what they are doing.
So that's how you will solve that issue of going from...
We give ourselves 3 years.
Yeah.
So the first 3 years will be a massive investment on international talent, and we try to phase it out and make an ideal group of people. I think we will never phase out the whole group of international talents. But on the other hand, what we see now is we have a lot of international talents in Saudi Arabia, but they're there for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. They didn't evolve. They didn't grow. And this is what we want to avoid also. We want to have a constant mixture of people that are coming in.
So that issue around talent and skills, you're looking to address through kind of training and that approach, but then also through the technology choices as well. Can you give us a sense of what those technology choices are, who you're working with, some of those key partners, those key providers?
What Peter was telling translates into a concept where you say, okay, we want to actually, and it was earlier on when we had the discussion about HDR and how you produce that, we sort of have everything comes in, and we have a few key people very specialized who will make sure that everything that comes in is quality checked, prepared, and ready to go in the production areas, where you then have a very classic baseband infrastructure, SDI-based, a gallery, as we've been doing it for 20, 30 years now, where you can actually just cut the cameras, have all signals coming in the right format, produce on your replay system in a very traditional way. And the beauty about this, let's call it old school technology, is that you can train people in quite a short time to actually operate that. So this concept of training local people is we can get them into the real day-to-day production environment, whereas we have this backbone of IP. So this means like what we do in the IP is, because there's a lot of stadiums coming in, a lot of cameras, we need a huge router. That's where IP makes sense. We need to do a lot of conversions. That's where an IP infrastructure is useful to centralize your processing. But what you're doing there is not the true production. It's preparing things and it's patching tie lines, avoiding the fact that we would need to find those rare specimens, which are called network architects or network engineers. And then you hand over to the other thing. So that's how we translated the objective of what they wanted to do in something pragmatic, and not say, let's do all IP because everybody is doing it. Let's find something that is hybrid and that could work for this setup.
So what we create also is, training people is very, very difficult. Keeping them eager to learn is very difficult. By building 4 galleries and by building 2 hubs, we have a CCU hub and we have a slow-mo hub, where we have extra positions than what we originally need, so we can add people there. But if you have 1 game coming in, we can have 4 galleries doing the same game, and the 3 other galleries are done by young people that are learning and testing and checking, and they can really do the same as what the main director is doing, and afterwards we can compare them to each other, where you maybe should better do this, you stay too long on that picture, the VAR should have gone there, or this or that. So this gives a very fast way of training people in the actual moment. What you don't have on a traditional way. We're not going to put 3 OBs because we're going to do some extra training. Maybe sometimes feasible, but most of the time not. So these are all the parts where we believe that we can get people faster up to a level where they can start doing productions or contribute to productions, aside from
it's the same in audio, where you actually have the 4 audio galleries where they actually mix the live games, but there's a 5th central position who has access to all of them, actually monitors the intercom, can override, can correct, can teach them while there's actual productions going on. So it's more like this sort of supervising, quality checking, overall control with the specialists, and then having guys that are learning it in the real positions.
So just talk me through the timeline. You mentioned the August deadline what are the other kind of key points that you've got between now and then, and how does that kind of, I guess, evolve over the next couple of years or so?
Well, timeline politics catches us a bit by surprise. Okay, so we are about 50 days behind on the original start of the schedule of the project. Ramadan comes in tomorrow, so I believe by end of Ramadan we are up and running. And at that moment we need to make a new prediction where we're going to be by August, where we're going to be by the end of the year. But it's normally what is predicted now is that by the end of January, we should have 2 galleries running and do per week 4 games of the total amount of games. And by the beginning of next season, 90%. There will never be 100%. Some areas are very difficult. Saudi Arabia is a very big country with a lot of parts where there's, I think, never anybody was before. So it depends a bit on which clubs are in the first league, in the Premier League, and where the stadiums are, that we need to reconnect. We have now, they increased the Premier League with 2 extra clubs. And to be fair, one of the clubs comes from a place it's really very far away. And the connectivity is a bit of a challenge. But we will get there.
Okay.
We never give up.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to checking in with you again at some point and keeping track of the progress. So thank you very much for joining us and for explaining the project to us as well.
Thank you very
Ronald,
much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you very much. Shukran.